Cedar, corn, and coyote, the herbal lore of Native American medicine. Listen to the fire. Listen to the wind. The plants will tell you their names if you sit long enough. The earth does not forget her language, only we do. Introduction. Long before colonization scattered their wisdom, the indigenous peoples of North America lived in harmony with the land, reading its signs, speaking its languages, and honoring its spirits. Plants were not just tools, they were kin, teachers, and allies. From the sacred groves of the Pacific Northwest to the high mesas of the Southwest, Native American herbalism was interwoven with stories, animal totems, songs, and ceremonies. This episode walks softly through their herbal traditions, guided by cedar smoke, coyote tales, and the gentle rustle of cornstalks in the wind.
Plant spirits and animal allies.
Native plant medicine was deeply animistic. Herbs were living spirits, each with a story, a song, and a gift. Before harvesting, one would speak to the plant, offer tobacco or cornmeal, and sometimes sing its gathering song. Totemic animals often guided which herbs were used and how. Trickster and teacher, often associated with chaos, but also cleverness and herbal wisdom. Plants like datura or jimsonweed, which bring visions and danger, were linked to his path.
Bear!
Symbol of healing and introspection. Bear taught humans which roots to dig, bear rusha being one of the most sacred. Deer, messenger and heart opener. Herbs like wild rose, used in love charms and grief medicine, were considered deer medicines. Cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and tobacco. The sacred four. These four plants are the cornerstones of many Native American spiritual traditions, each carrying a specific energy and purpose. 1. Cedar, a powerful purifier and protector. Its smoke is used to drive away negative spirits and cleanse ritual spaces, often placed on fires during sweat lodge ceremonies. 2. White sage, burned for cleansing and calling in benevolent spirits, associated with the grandmother spirits and dream work. 3. Sweetgrass, braided and burned to invite good energy, peace and blessings, known as the hair of Mother Earth. 4. Tobacco, not for pleasure but for prayer. It was offered to plants before harvesting and to spirits during ceremonies, considered the most sacred plant of all. Note, modern over-harvesting of white sage and sweetgrass has endangered these sacred herbs. It's vital to harvest sustainably or source from indigenous growers only. Herbal healing and traditional medicine. Medicine people were trained not only in herbs, but in dreams, rituals, and spirit diagnosis. The medicine wheel was used to understand both physical and spiritual illness. Some healing herbs included yarrow, used to stop bleeding and cleanse wounds, also placed under pillows for dream protection. Osha root, bear root, used for respiratory infections, protection charms, and spirit defense. Willow bark, the original aspirin, brewed for pain, fever, and inflammation. Juniper berries, burned for purification, brewed for digestive issues, and used in protective amulets. Cranberry and blueberry, more than just food, used in potions for kidney health, women's medicine, and ceremonial offerings. Healing was a communal practice. Drumming, chanting, and family participation were often part of the remedy. Ceremony, sweat and smoke. The line between healing and spirituality was thin. Herbs were part of every rite, from puberty to mourning. Sweat lodges. Herbs like cedar, mugwort, or pine were thrown on hot stones. The steam would purify body and spirit. Vision quests, herbs like tobacco, sage, and occasionally datura were used to induce altered states in isolated fasts, helping the seeker meet their spirit guide. Naming ceremonies. Infants were blessed sweetgrass smoke and gifted their spirit names alongside a totem animal and plant protector. Plants of power and danger. While healing was the main use, native peoples also knew the deeper shadows of herbal power. Datura, jimsonweed, a dangerous psychoactive used only by seasoned shamans, linked to coyote, death, transformation, and spirit travel. Loco weed, astragalus pea, used in small doses to confuse enemies or drive spirits away. Poison hemlock, used carefully to anoint weapons or create spiritual boundaries. Never used internally. These were not evil plants, but sacred, powerful, and never touched lightly. More than food, the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, were not only agricultural staples, but magical triads. Corn, a sacred grandmother spirit. Cornmeal was used to draw ritual circles, feed spirits, and bless the land. Beans, symbol of cooperation and grounding, used in fertility charms and nourishing broths given to the sick. Squash, protector spirit. Its leaves and seeds were made into poultices and charms for warding off bad luck. Corn husks were woven into spirit dolls, placed in the home for protection or burned as offerings. Wind songs and herbal dreams. Dreams were medicine. Mugwort was sometimes burned or infused in water to wash the dreamer's face. The Lakota and Hopi tribes used herbs like wild mint, sagebrush, and wormwood to commune with dream spirits. Dream catchers, while now commercialized, were traditionally infused with intention and often dressed with herbs and feathers to attract good visions and trap bad ones. Closing incantation: cedar for spirit, sweetgrass for grace, tobacco for prayer in a sacred place. From corn we came, to earth return, through fire and wind, the plant hearts burn. When the Buddha touched the earth, the trees bowed, the plants listened, the lotus opened. Enlightenment was not found beyond the world, but within the root, the leaf, the breath.
Introduction.
Unlike the fiery rites of Mediterranean temples or the ecstatic forest rites of the Druids, Buddhist plant magic is quiet, humble, hidden in bowls of tea, beads of fragrant wood, and the slow swirling smoke of incense. In early Buddhist and Himalayan traditions, herbs were less about domination and more about liberation, clearing karma, calming the mind, opening the path. This episode unfolds like a lotus. Layer by layer, we reveal the sacred herbs, trees, and flowers tied to the spiritual quest for stillness and awakening. The Bodhi tree, tree of enlightenment. The story begins under a tree. Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha while meditating under the sacred Ficus religiosa, later known as the Bodhi tree. It was not merely a backdrop. It was a spiritual ally, a silent witness, and part of the transmission of awakening. Its leaves are heart-shaped, symbolizing the union of compassion and wisdom. In Buddhist magic, the Bodhi leaf is a talisman of clarity, memory, and calm, carried in charms or written upon with prayers. Even today, Bodhi seeds are used to make mala beads, each bead a step toward inner stillness. Sacred plants of purification and insight. Rather than dramatic spells, Buddhist plant usage focuses on purification, mindfulness, and spiritual merit. Every offering, incense stick, or herb-laced bath was a gesture of karma cleansing. Key plants in Buddhist traditions. Lotus, Nelumbo nucifera, grows from mud yet blooms unstained, symbol of enlightenment. Lotus seeds are used in prayer beads. Lotus petals in herbal baths for cleansing past life burdens. Sandalwood, sacred scent burned in temples to calm the mind. Sandalwood oil is used to anoint statues, malas, and the foreheads of monks before intense retreats. Frankincense and myrrh, though associated with Western mysticism, both were traded along Silk Road and adopted into Buddhist incense formulas. Neem, bitter yet cleansing. Leaves are boiled for purification baths, used in temple floor washes, and chewed during fasting. Camphor, used to clear bad karma smoke. It's burned to exorcise negative attachments or when beginning new spiritual chapters. Ayurveda and Buddhist healing temples. In early Buddhist India and Tibet, Ayurvedic medicine was deeply respected. Buddhist monks trained in Sowa Rigpa, science of healing, would create elaborate herbal thankas, paintings of healing plants, gods, and body energy maps. Important herbs in healing rites. Ashwagandha, a root of grounding, used to balance the nervous system, enhance meditation stamina, and heal fear-based trauma. Tulsi, holy basil, called the elixir of life, boiled into teas for protection, immune strength, and devotion. Sacred to Vishnu, but adopted by Buddhists as a house guardian.
Trifala.
A blend of 3 fruits used to detoxify the body before major ceremonies or meditation retreats. These herbs weren't just physical medicine, they were spiritual. A cleansed body was a better vessel for the Dharma. Incense, offering portal presence. To Buddhists, incense is not simply fragrance, it is presence. It marks sacred space, invites ancestors, and pleases guardian spirits. Monasteries across Asia blend their own incense from sacred woods and herbs. Agar wood, oud, deep, rare, and expensive, burned to access profound trance states and honor high deities like Avalokiteshvara. Juniper and rhododendron, In Himalayan Buddhist smoke offerings, these plants are burned in large cauldrons with sampa and yak butter to feed hungry spirits and demons. Clove, star anise and cinnamon, used in Tibetan temple incense to awaken clarity and banish inner distraction. Every waft of smoke is a teaching. Everything rises, transforms and fades. Tea ceremony and plant meditation. In Zen Buddhism, the tea ceremony became a living meditation. The tea itself was a herbal sacrament. Matcha green tea powder, ground from specially grown leaves, believed to sharpen the mind for zazen-seated meditation. Chrysanthemum, brewed for insight and internal peace, thought to illuminate the hidden sun within the heart-mind. Earthy, aged teas used to ground energy after rituals or balance excessive yang. To drink mindfully was to dissolve separation. Tea, breath, bowl, and self all became one. Ritual offerings of flower and flame rather than blood or ecstatic rites. Buddhist rituals favor simple, pure offerings, a petal, a lamp, a grain of rice. Herbs and flowers used in offerings include marigold, offered for brightness of mind and devotion to the bodhisattvas. Jasmine, its heady scent associated with Avalokiteshvara, goddess of mercy. Rice and saffron, mixed into water and poured at shrines, symbolizing abundance and detachment. The most important offering, however, is always intent. Even a wilted herb, given with a clear heart, was a step on the path to liberation. Herbs for karma, dreams and death. Certain herbs were used for karmic release, prophetic dreams, and even conscious dying. Blue lotus, sometimes steeped in wine and consumed for lucid dreaming and compassion practices. Spikenard, jatamansi, oil of the Himalayas, massaged on the dying to ease the spirit's passing and soothe attachments. Patchouli and vetiver, used in grounding rituals after intense meditation or visions. In Tibetan death rituals, the body is sometimes wrapped in herbal cloths, a final offering to earth, sky, and the Bardo realms beyond. Beneath the bodhi, I sit in still, the lotus blooms, the mind is will. From bitter root to blossom white, I walk the path from dark to light. Episode 13. Blood wine and cypress, the death herbs of the Etruscans. They did not fear death, for they dined with it. They wove flowers into funeral robes, drank poppy wine beneath the cypress trees, and walked boldly into the underworld, not in dread, but in preparation. Introduction. Before the rise of Rome, there was Etruria, a mysterious, artistic, and spiritually rich civilization in what is now central Italy. The Etruscans were obsessed with death, but not in a grim or grotesque way. They viewed it as a continuation, a sacred crossing into another world, one that required gifts, rituals, and most intriguingly, herbs. Their tombs were painted with banquets, dancers, and underworld spirits. Their ceremonies overflowed with intoxicating drinks, aromatic oils, and botanical offerings that both soothed the soul and seduced the dead. This episode unearths the baneful, beautiful, and prophetic plant magic of the Etruscans, keepers of one of antiquity's most potent yet hidden green traditions. Plants of the afterlife, death as a garden. In Etruscan lore, the afterlife wasn't a dry pit or burning hell. It was a mystic garden, a dark paradise ruled by chthonic deities like Aita, Hades, and Vanth, the winged psychopomp goddess. Their herbal traditions reflect this sensual yet somber worldview. Cypress, Cupressus sempervirens, the tree of the graveyard, planted at necropolises to sanctify death and signal sacred ground. Its scent was believed to guide spirits. Poppy, Papaver somniferum, sacred to the Etruscan underworld rites, crushed into blood-red wine and drunk at funerals to enter trance and commune with the dead. Asphodel, the flower of the underworld meadows, placed in tombs or burned in rites to ensure peaceful passage into the next realm. The line between mourning and magic was thin. Funeral feasts were both remembrance and ritual. Blood wine, opium, and oracles. The Etruscans were renowned for their divination, especially the art of haruspicy, reading omens in animal entrails and fire. But another method was the use of herb-infused wine and incense to receive visions. Poppy wine, often blended with honey and myrtle berries, used to honour the dead but also to induce prophetic dreams or possession by underworld spirits. Henbane, Hyoscyamus, a dangerous nightshade plant, smoked or brewed into potions by priestesses, opened portals to the dead and gods, often with severe physical tolls. Rutagraviolins, worn behind the ear or burned to ward off spirits who lingered too long, also used to cleanse diviners after trance states. Priestesses would drink or anoint with these mixtures before entering tombs for trance prophecy. The dead did not whisper unless called.
Embalming. Funerary oils.
The Etruscans believed in beautifying death. Even in burial, the dead were cleansed, scented, and ornamented. Myrrh labdanum, resinous, bitter, and sensual, rubbed into the skin of the deceased or burned during cremation. Olive oil with laurel and juniper, used to anoint the body in the burial chamber, calling on solar protection in the shadow realm. Spikenard, imported from the east. A high priestess oil reserved for noble funerals and necromantic rites. The body was not abandoned. It was prepared as if for a wedding with death. Baneful botanicals and witchcraft. Etruscan texts refer to striges, witches or nocturnal spirits who flew at night, like the later Roman lamiae. These figures were both feared and sought for their baneful plant knowledge. Mandrake, Mandragora officinarum, used in binding rituals and necromantic sex magic. Its root was carved into human shapes and buried with incantations. Belladonna, Atropa belladonna, used in flying ointments, seductive poisons, and divination salves, said to allow a sorceress to dance among tombs in spirit form. Hellebore, Helleborus niger, known as the herb of madness, inhaled during spirit summoning rites, also smeared at tomb entrances to prevent the dead from returning. Such herbs were not for casual use. They were often guarded by priestesses trained in rites passed down orally.
Tombs.
Masks and funereal theatrics. Etruscan tombs often featured masks, both literal and metaphorical. Masks of plants, beasts, and spirits worn during ritual theatre and burial rites. Herbal dyes from madder root, woad, and saffron were used to colour death robes and ceremonial garments. Dancers at funerals wore garlands of ivy, vine, and fennel, channeling Dionysian energies into the space between life and death. Wormwood bundles were burned to protect mourners from spirit attachment. Death was not just mourned, it was performed. Ritual gardens and tomb offerings. Even the tomb itself was a kind of ritual garden. Seeds were buried alongside the body so that flowers would bloom from the grave, a symbol of rebirth and remembrance. Rosemary, for remembrance. Lavender, for peace. Marjoram and thyme, to invite ancestral spirits in dreams. Small terracotta pots were often placed in tombs filled with dried herbs and sacred ash. These were offerings to Vanth and Etruscan psychopomp deities. Closing incantation. Beneath the cypress, red wine flows, a seed, a root, the spirit knows. Through poppy's veil and laurel's breath, I kiss the mouth of sacred death. Episode 14, Vines of Venus, Herbal Aphrodisiacs and Seduction in Greco-Roman Magic. She bathed in rose water, wore garlands of myrtle, and anointed herself with oils that stirred the blood and bound the heart. Magic began with a touch and bloomed from root to kiss. Introduction. Love was never just an emotion in the ancient world. It was a force, a spell, a divine energy to be invoked, enticed, and controlled. For the Greeks and Romans, plants were the bridge between flesh and spirit, between longing and conquest. Herbalism was sensual, sacred, and sometimes dangerous, especially when wielded in the name of Aphrodite or Venus. This episode winds through vineyards, gardens, and boudoirs to explore the herbs of pleasure, seduction, binding, and erotic enchantment. Whether seeking divine union or earthly bliss, ancient lovers and witches knew exactly which root to grind, which blossom to burn. Aphrodite, born of sea foam, was goddess of beauty, love, sex, and irresistible allure. Her sacred garden was a living spell, every herb and flower charged with magnetism. Myrtle, Myrtus communis, the herb most sacred to her. Worn as a crown, added to bathwater or burned with dove's feathers in love rites, myrtle stimulated desire while purifying intent. Rose, the queen of love herbs. Petals were strewn on beds, made into perfumes, and eaten in honeyed confections. Roses were also used to seal oaths of devotion. Violet and pansy, associated with secret love and sudden infatuation, used in covert charms and passion. These weren't just romantic decorations. These weren't just romantic decorations, they were active enchantments. Elixirs of passion and potion craft. Aphrodisiacs were more than mythical. They were culinary, magical, and sometimes medicinal. Potion makers, especially women, guarded recipes for teas, wines, and oils to awaken passion. Damiana, a leaf infused in wine and said to arouse the belly and soften the will. Anise and fennel seeds, ground into honeyed cakes or dissolved in warm wine for libido and fertility. Wild lettuce, Lactuca virosa, thought to enhance dreams and lust, soaked in vinegar and served before ritual baths. The Romans called such drinks veneris, the wine of Venus, and believed it made the heart pliable and the body electric. Sensual baths, anointing oils and body magic. Before a love rite, both men and women would bathe ritually. Not just for hygiene, but to cleanse, charge and transform the aura into a magnet for desire. Herbs used in sensual baths. Lavender and yarrow, calming the nerves while opening the heart. Patchouli and cinnamon bark, stirring the blood and invoking earthy passion. Orange blossom and jasmine. Oils of allure, often used in body massage or to dress candles for attraction spells. Oil blends would be massaged onto pressure points, mixed with aphrodisiac resins or used to anoint mirrors, beds, or the genitals before ritual intercourse.
Magic of binding and glamour.
Love in ancient magic wasn't always tender. There were bindings, obsessions, and glamours, herbal spells that drew, trapped, or inflamed. Vervain, verbena officinalis, used to enchant the voice and speech, worn or drunk before confession of love. Orchid roots are to inflame passion and virility, sometimes fed secretly to lovers. Orris root, Iris germanica, a classic in love powders, sprinkled on bed sheets in letters or brewed with rainwater to attract a specific lover. Apple seeds and pomegranate rind, associated with binding spells and symbolic of devotion but also obsession. Such magic was performed under Venus hour on Fridays, especially during waxing moons. Offerings, altars and rituals of Venus. To work with Venus or Aphrodite was to treat beauty as sacred. Offerings of milk, honey, rose petals, apples, and perfumes were left at shrines or carried in sachets for glamour and luck. A sample love ritual: 1. Light a pink or red candle dressed with rose oil. 2. Place myrtle and honey in a bowl of spring water. 3. Speak a charm. As rose draws bee and tide draws moon, so draw my love, may they come soon. By Venus's vine and sweet perfume, let passion rise and blossom bloom. Divine union and sacred sex. Certain temples of Aphrodite, especially in Corinth and Cyprus, practiced forms of sacred sexuality. Priestesses used herbal incense, anointing oils, and wine infusions to prepare for divine congress, whether through trance, prophecy, or ritual intercourse. These rites were not carnal indulgence, but seen as communion with the goddess, a way to channel beauty, ecstasy, and healing. Cinnamon, myrrh, and frankincense, used to smudge both body and temple before sacred union.
Bay laurel.
Chewed to awaken clairvoyance and divine fire in the act of union. Sensual herbal charms and amulets. The Romans, especially women, loved to wear love charms or carry enchanted sachets. Sachets made of rose, vervain, myrtle, and magnetite were carried in gowns or placed under pillows. Necklaces of amber beads and rose thorns were believed to draw admirers and ward off rivals. Wreaths of violet and ivy were worn at banquets to attract flirtation and favour. Closing incantation: by petals, pulse, and roots desire, by scented oil and candle fire, I call the kiss, I charm the flame, by Venus's breath may passion claim. Episode 15. The Steppe Witch's Cauldron, Scythian Smoke, Psychoactive Seeds, and Sky Burials. She wears no crown, but a fox pelt hood. Her throne is the wind. She sees with hawk eyes, speaks with wolf breath. The plants she burns do not heal. They open the spirit and call the ancestors home.
Introduction.
Among the windswept grasslands stretching from the Black Sea to the Altai Mountains roamed the Scythians, nomadic, horse-riding pagans who lived and died beneath endless skies. Known for their sky burials, fierce warriors, and deep shamanic traditions, they left behind Kurgan tombs rich with golden jewelry, ritual tools, and traces of psychoactive herbs. Though often dismissed as barbarian raiders by the Greeks, these steppe people were astute herbalists, spirit journeyers, and death magicians. Their witches, often women, travelled through smoke and trance, guided by foxes, wolves, and birds of prey. This episode revives the forgotten herbal lore of the Scythian and Sarmatian witches, earthbound mystics who brewed power not from books, but from seed, skull, and flame. Smoke temples and ritual fires. The Scythians didn't build temples. They burned them into being. In a ritual described by Herodotus, Scythians created tent-like fumigation chambers, placing red-hot stones in bowls and casting aromatic seeds and herbs onto them. Cannabis sativa, found in large quantities in Scythian burial mounds, burned in tents to induce trance, summon ancestors, and prepare warriors or witches for ritual ecstasy. Coriander seeds, thrown into fires with cannabis to sweeten the smoke and sharpen visions. Wild fennel and wormwood, added to alter the journey, slow the breath, and commune with animal spirits. These smoke chambers were both wombs and gates, the witch emerging from them reborn, altered, and bearing messages from the unseen. Plants of the sky and shadow. The Scythians believed that souls flew upward like hawks. Their witches used herbs to guide this flight, protect it, or call it back. Henbane, Hyoscyamus niger, grown in secret places and used in ointments, induced delirium and visions of the dead. Leaves and seeds were dried and powdered. Datura stramonium, used for necromancy and flying spells, often combined with animal fat and rubbed on wrists or eyelids. Ephedra, a stimulant that brought clarity and endurance during extended trances or sky dances. These weren't hallucinogens in the modern sense. They were gate keys, used sparingly and ritually. The shamaness, bone rattles and cauldrons. Graves of high-ranking Scythian women have revealed bronze cauldrons still blackened with herbal residues. Antler and bone rattles, foxtail charms, and tattooed skin bearing plant or animal symbols. Herbs buried alongside them. Thyme, juniper berries, and poppy heads. These women were seers, healers, and spirit guides. The cauldron was not for stew, but for transformative brews and ritual smoke. Sky burials and herb-wrapped dead. The Scythians practiced air burials, laying out the dead in open air or raised structures for birds to carry the souls skyward. But this was never done raw or unguarded. The dead were anointed with resinous herbs and oils, juniper, pine pitch, coriander oil, wrapped in wool and felt packed with herbs like lavender, thyme, and bluebells, not for comfort, but to guide and soothe the soul's ascent. Burned or buried with cauldrons, incense, and smoking tools to ensure the journey continued on the other side. The Scythians believed in spirit allies, animals that walked beside witches and warriors alike. Herbs were used to summon, honour, or mimic these spirits. Wolf's paw, lycopodium, burned to call wolf spirits, used before hunts or night rituals. Feathers soaked in clove oil were waved over the body to bless with hawk vision. Burned nettle and pine cones were offerings for fox spirits, tricksters, guides, and seducers. Each tribe had its own rites, passed from shaman to apprentice in smoke and song. Herbal amulets and charms of the steppe. Magic was portable. Charms were sewn into clothes, braided into horse manes, or hung from spear shafts. Foxtail pouches filled with juniper berries and henbane seeds for protection. Clay beads stuffed with poppy petals worn over the heart to invite dreams. Braided grasses dipped in blood and ash, tied around the wrist to protect from possession. Even children carried herbs, wormwood sprigs sewn into collars to ward off wandering spirits. Rituals of weather, wind, and war. Witches of the steppe were also weather callers. In times of drought or battle, they burned plants on hilltops to speak to the sky spirits. Burning cow dung with thyme and coriander created sacred smoke to call rain. Oats, sage, and salt were tossed into campfires before war for luck and unity. Warriors chewed valerian root before battle, not to calm but to numb fear and heighten blood rage. Their power was rooted in wind, weed, and will. Closing incantation: by thorn and seed, by hoof and flame, I ride the wind, I call the name. Smoke my steed, sky my door, let the dead rise evermore. Episode 16, Garden of the Crescent Moon, the herbal traditions of ancient Mesopotamia. She speaks in the language of reeds and roots. Her prayers are pressed into clay. her offerings poured in oil. From moon-washed ziggurats and city gardens, the magic of Babylon blooms.
Temples of fragrance and healing.
In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the first great cities rose, and with them, some of the earliest records of herbal magic and medicine. Ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians did not separate science and sorcery. Healing was holy, and every herb had its divine patron. In temple gardens, priestesses and herbalists grew plants for rituals, offerings, and healing. Herbs weren't just tools, they were gifts from the gods, especially Ningishzida, the serpent deity of vegetation, and Gula, the great goddess of healing. Sacred plants of the Fertile Crescent. Mesopotamian herb lore was both ritualistic and medicinal. Cuneiform tablets list hundreds of plants used by Asu physician-magicians and Ashipu, ritual healers. Among them, frankincense and myrrh, imported resins burned for cleansing and divine favour, offered to gods and used in funerary rites. Coriander, ground and mixed with honey for digestive problems and as an amulet herb for new mothers.
Mandrake!
A powerful love and fertility herb associated with dreams, seduction and divine favour. Applied for both beauty and protective magic, tied to Inanna and her sensual rites. Tamarisk and date palm, life-giving trees. Tamarisk branches were used in protective spells and cleansing rituals. 3. Inanna's perfumed spells. Inanna Ishtar was the goddess of love, war, and the underworld, and her rites were rich with scent and herbs. Her priestesses anointed themselves with sacred oils before entering ritual ecstasy. Perfumes of cedar, cypress, and galbanum were used to open sacred space. Rosewater, spikenard, and saffron bathed the body before invoking the goddess. Poppy and mandrake wine may have been used to induce prophetic or erotic trance. The sacred oil is poured, the doors are opened. The priestess sings, "Come, lover of my scent, come, rider of my dream."
Ivor.
The Ashipu's Garden of Spells. The Ashipu were ritual magicians who used herbs in exorcisms, blessings, and healing charms. Their tools included bundles of reeds and herbs tied with dyed wool, clay tablets inscribed with incantations, washing bowls in which herbs were steeped to make ritual waters. Common ritual herbs: garlic, hung to ward off Lamashtu, a child-stealing demoness; juniper and tamarisk, burned in sick rooms to banish plague spirits; licorice root, used in throat remedies and protective teas; mint and dill, for love spells and purification. Amulets, talismans, and herbal clay magic. Mesopotamians wore amulets filled with dried herbs and sacred inscriptions. Popular combinations: lapis lazuli beads, coriander seeds for protection and harmony; henna-stained linens, poppy petals for seduction and vivid dreams; clay cones stuffed with herbs placed in home altars to attract blessing and repel evil. The power of clay was everywhere. Protective tablets buried in thresholds inscribed herbal incantations tucked under beds. Offerings moulded by hand and buried with the dead. Death, burial, and botanical offerings. Death was not the end, it was a journey to the underworld ruled by Ereshkigal. To aid the soul, juniper twigs and date syrup were offered beside the dead. Bitter herbs like wormwood helped cleanse the spirit for passage. Lotus, water lily, and pomegranate symbolized rebirth and were sometimes placed near tombs. Some tablets speak of herbs that call the dead or prevent them from rising unbidden, especially in cities plagued by unburied ghosts. Earth-rooted ritual, a magical formula. Gather 7 stalks of mint before the moon is full. Crush them in oil and wine. Speak the name of the one who ails. Pour the brew beside the fig tree. Bury the name in clay beneath the mother's stone. The sickness shall depart. O earth that brings forth roots, O moon that sees the seed, O fire that frees the soul, let the garden of the gods grow in me. Episode 17, The Black Land's Baneful Roots, Poison Plants and Serpent Magic in Egypt. To protect a tomb, she weaves wolfsbane into linen. To punish betrayal, she stirs the root of death into wine. She is not priestess nor queen, but serpent daughter of the Nile. Death and Apotheosis, Egypt's dangerous garden. Ancient Egypt is famed for its golden tombs and solar deities, but beneath the papyrus lies a darker magic, older than pyramids. One of poison, venom, and transformation. Alongside herbs of healing and mummification, the Egyptians knew how to harm and how to ward against those who did. Here we find baneful roots, protective serpents, and rituals so secret they were buried with the dead. From desert-shadowed temples to reed-lined Nile banks, poison was not evil. It was a sacred force used to protect, punish, or preserve. Plants of death, punishment and protection. Some herbs were feared, others revered. Many were both. Henbane, used in sleep and necromancy rites. Its smoke invoked visions but could also kill. Aconite, wolfsbane, rare but possibly used in priestly mixtures, anointing weapons, or as punishment in royal courts. Mandrake, both an aphrodisiac and a sedative, associated with Hathor and the secrets of dream sorcery. Colocynth, bitter apple, a violently purgative plant, used in trials of truth and as a spiritual cleanser of evil spirits. White nymphaea, sacred lotus, tranquil and beautiful, but in concentrated form a hypnotic drug. These were not used lightly. They belonged to temple keepers, embalmers, magicians, and the dead themselves. 3. Cobra priestesses and serpent wards. Egypt's most feared guardians were not human, they were serpents.
The Uraeus, rearing cobra.
Symbolized divine authority and lethal protection. Wadjet, cobra goddess of the north, guarded pharaohs and shrines. Her breath could scorch an army. Snake venom, especially from asp and horned vipers, was sometimes ritually collected. In secret rites, cobra venom was added to protective salves or burial linens. Amulets in the form of coiled serpents were buried with cursed tablets. Sorceresses invoking Wadjet might burn henbane or lotus while reciting serpent incantations written in red ink, colour of danger, magic, and blood.
Ivy!
Tombs, oils, and the poisoned dead. Mummification was a plant-heavy art, blending sacred and sinister. Common ingredients: cedar oil, to dissolve internal organs in the preparation of elite bodies. Bitumen and resinous myrrh, for preservation, but also used to seal tombs with spiritual heat. Natron and ash of bitter herbs purified the dead and repelled tomb robbers or wandering spirits. Some suggest that tomb curses weren't just metaphorical. Let he who disturbs this grave taste the root that kills. Some burial chambers were believed to be guarded with poisoned incense or oils, left behind as spiritual and physical traps.
There.
The poison scrolls, hidden knowledge of the houses of life.
The Prt.2.
House of Life was a temple archive containing both healing texts and forbidden formula, including curses, love potions, and baneful mixtures. A secret branch of temple magicians, Keri Heb, were entrusted with recipes for wine of forgetfulness, instructions for ritual slaying of snakes and spirits, protection scrolls for kingdoms under siege. These texts mention red ochre, bloodroot, scorpion oil, and desert herbs, ingredients for warding spells and warfare charms. Sorcery in service and shadow. Not all poison was malice. Sometimes it was sacrificial, the shedding of one life to protect another. At other times it was vengeance by the oppressed or control from the elite. Popular amulets and protective rites included papyrus scrolls soaked in henbane oil and burned to summon justice, mandrake dolls pierced with copper pins for betrayal, black coal, galena, mixed with protective herbs worn by temple guards and mourners alike. The seventh, ritual from the tomb of a magician.
Fragment.
Lay the henbane in milk from a black goat, whisper the name of the liar 7 times, place the root under their bed on the waning moon. If the serpent answers, justice will be swift. Closing spell, the veil of Wadjet. Coil, O guardian, coil. Let no thief pass, let no evil touch. Breathe your fire through this door and seal it with fang and root. Episode 18, The Herbs of the Hearth. Everyday magic in ancient households. Open quote, not all spells are cast in temples. Some are whispered over soup or stirred into laundry water. The kitchen is a cauldron, the broom a wand, and the doorframe a charm. Close quote. I, the domestic witch, sacred work in common places. While kings built pyramids and priests lit temple fires, millions of ancient people practiced quiet magic in kitchens, courtyards, and cellars. Here lived the hearth witch, the midwife, the matron, the grandfather with herb wisdom. Home was not separate from the sacred. It was the sacred: birth, illness, love, death, all began and ended within the home, and so too did everyday spells. 2. Common herbs with uncommon powers. These humble herbs were found in nearly every ancient home. Bay laurel, protection and prophetic dreaming, leaves burned or placed in doorways. Lavender, love and peace, used in sleep satchels or strewn on floors to calm arguments. Thyme, courage and cleansing, added to bathwater before war or childbirth. Mint, for prosperity and sharp wit, placed in wine or ground beneath the threshold. Onion and garlic, not just for food, hung in doorways against evil, bound to infants for protection. Rosemary, memory and blessing, burned with incense, woven into hair for sacred occasions. Salt, everlasting symbol of purity, banishment, and sacred boundaries. Each household had its own rituals, often unspoken. A cup placed upside down for luck, a sprig above the cradle, a burnt offering in the fireplace, whispered with intention. 3. The hearth as altar, the broom as wand. In many ancient cultures, Greece, Rome, Norse, Mesopotamian, and beyond, the hearth fire was the heart of the home and also its sacred flame. In Greece, it was Hestia's flame, never allowed to go out. In Rome, the Lares, household spirits, were honoured with herbs, wine, and incense. In Northern Europe, embers were saved and transferred to new homes as ancestral fire. The broom, too, held power, used to sweep out illness, misfortune, or bad dreams, sprinkled with rosemary water or bay leaf smoke for purification. In some traditions, brooms were lipped over in hand fastings and threshold rites. Love birth and threshold magic. Some rituals tied to the transitions of life. Love sachets sewn into clothing with lavender, rose petals, and basil. Childbirth teas of raspberry leaf, fennel, and chamomile, steeped with intention. Newborns bathed with thyme and salt to ward off evil eye and invite health. New homes were ritually swept and anointed with garlic, sage, or holy water. Thresholds, doors, windows, gates were magical boundaries. Herbs were buried near them, hung over them, or even mixed into the building materials. Open quote, keep a sprig of rue in your door frame, no curse will pass it. Close quote. Kitchen witchcraft. Magic in food and drink. Every meal was an opportunity for folk magic. Bread baked with caraway seeds for protection. Wine stirred clockwise with a laurel branch to encourage truth. Honey and cinnamon in milk for love. Leftover salt never thrown away, used to absorb bad luck or spilled into fire to banish evil. Cooking itself could be ritual, stirring with prayers, tasting with intention, feeding others as spellcasting. A mother's soup was not only nourishment, it was a healing brew of generations. Rest, dream and quiet sorcery. Bedtime was sacred. Chamomile pillows for prophetic dreams. Mugwort bundles hung above the bed to keep away night spirits. Bay leaves under the pillow to dream of one's future spouse. Sage-infused oil massaged into feet to heal grief or fatigue. Children were told stories that doubled as teaching spells. Every lullaby was a charm. The sixth, a forgotten spell from a clay tablet. Reconstruction. Open quote, I take salt from the sacred flame, thyme from the cradle, mint from the wine of love. I sweep this house of shadows, let only blessing remain. Close quote. 8. Everyday magic today. Much of this magic survives. In the way we light a candle when someone dies, in the way we cook for someone we love, in the comfort of a clean house, in the whisper over tea, get well soon. You are not far from the ancients, you are their hearth keeper. Episode 19, The Witch's Garden, Baneful Herbs in European Grimoires and Witch Trials. Open quote, herbs that bite, herbs that burn, herbs that dream, all gathered by moonlight when the village sleeps. Close quote. Baneful roots, poison, power and persecution. In the late Middle Ages and Renaissance, Europe was both obsessed with and terrified of witchcraft. Plants played a central role, not just in healing, but in harming, hexing and flight. Whether used by cunning folk or accused witches, baneful herbs were feared and revered. Witches were said to gather these plants at liminal times, midnight, crossroads, graveyards, reciting incantations and prayers backwards. And whether real or imagined, their knowledge of the poison garden terrified the church and state alike. The herb witches of folklore. European folk tradition is full of the wise woman, healer or midwife, sometimes honoured, sometimes condemned. Many were herbalists who knew the difference between a tea that healed and one that killed. Some became scapegoats. From Salem to Bamberg, from Scotland to Catalonia, accused witches were said to keep mandrake root, shrieked when pulled from the earth, used in flying ointments. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, sedative, visionary and hallucinogenic. Datura, dream herb and poison, sacred to both witches and shamans. Wolfsbane, aconite, incredibly toxic, used in curses and protections. Henbane, psychoactive, induces visions, used in ancient priesthoods. Foxglove, beautiful and deadly, later led to digitalis medicine. Hemlock, famous for Socrates' death, a feared execution and potion herb. These herbs weren't used lightly. They were for binding, protecting, avenging, and in some cases, escaping. Recipes from the grimoires. Many medieval grimoires and witch trial records mention potions and salves allegedly made from these plants. A reconstructed witch's flying ointment, 15th century Germany, might include belladonna, mandrake, henbane, fat, animal or human, cinquefoil or mugwort, beeswax or oil, moonlit prayers and incantations. These ointments were applied to the wrists, feet and genitals, inducing trance states where witches claimed to fly, shapeshift or commune with spirits. While some of this is surely folkloric exaggeration, many of these plants are true deliriants and can cause out-of-body sensations, euphoria or death. Open quote, to ride the nightmare you must anoint the flesh where the veil is thinnest. Close quote.
Blasphemy!
Witch trials, confessions and plant-based accusations. During Europe's witch craze, 15th to 17th century, courts and inquisitors were obsessed with witchcraft involving herbs. Many so-called confessions mention plants, gardens, salves, and secret brews. Accused women and men were said to grow poisonous herbs in hidden gardens, keep dried roots in their chimneys or under floorboards, make dolls stuffed with herbs and pierced with pins, poison livestock with concoctions of yew, hemlock, and wolfsbane. Some of these confessions were extracted under torture. Others, especially from cunning folk and hedge witches, were based on actual knowledge. Herbal counterspells and protection. For every curse, there was a counter-charm. Rue, worn or scattered to repel witches. St. John's wort, hung over beds for protection. Salt and iron, traditional wards in kitchens and barns. Angelica, considered a holy herb against hexes. Broomcorn and mugwort, used in sweeping rituals to cleanse rooms of malefic forces. People often planted protective herbs near doors and windows and burned them on witch nights, such as Walpurgis or Samhain. Witch gardens reimagined today. Modern witches have reclaimed the poison garden. Some carefully grow baneful herbs with respect, knowledge, and strict caution. These are plants of power, not to be used lightly, but to be understood deeply. To grow a witch's garden is to know your boundaries, to touch death, but not too closely. 7. Whispered charm from a forgotten witch. Open quote. A little rue behind the ear, a thorn of rose to pierce the fear, wormwood steeped for dreams tonight, and belladonna's kiss, moonlight. Close quote. Episode 20. The Green Priestess of Avalon, Arthurian Plant Lore and Druidic Rebirth. Open quote. Where apple blossoms bless the vale, the priestess walks in hooded pale. She gathers herbs by morning dew and sings the land its song anew. Close quote. Avalon, the isle beyond the mists. In the mists of Celtic myth and Arthurian legend, there lies Avalon, the Isle of Apples, a place of healing, mystery and rebirth. Said to be a sanctuary of priestesses, herb women and wise queens, Avalon blends druidic lore, fairy magic and early goddess tradition. To walk the gardens of Avalon is to enter a space where plant, spirit and soul memory intertwine. This episode reimagines that sacred grove. 2. The plant magic of Avalon. The priestesses of Avalon worked with herbs not only as medicine, but as spiritual allies. Each plant carried a vibration of season, element and story. Their gardens were circular, elemental and attuned to moon cycles. Apple, Malus domestica, symbol of Avalon itself. Apple trees were portals to the other world. The 5-pointed star in its core represented the goddess. Apple blossoms were used in bridal charms, healing teas and fertility rites. Mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, used by Avalonian seers to open the third eye and access dream visions. Mugwort was burned in moon rituals, infused in sleep pillows and tied into belts for midsummer. Hawthorn, Crataegus, a fairy tree sacred to the heart. It grew at boundaries between land and spirit, life and death. The priestesses used its flowers in May Day blessings and its thorns in warding spells. Yew, Taxus baccata, planted in groves near Avalonian shrines. Yew was the tree of eternal life and death. Its wood made sacred staves and its berries were used with reverence in rituals of soul passage. Meadowsweet, vervain, valerian, willow, each was used in seasonal rites, vervain for prophecy, valerian for deep trance, meadowsweet for rites of union, and willow for lunar communion and grief healing. 3. The priestess path and herbal roles. To train as a priestess of Avalon was to walk the spiral path through herbal craft, water blessings, shadow work, and dream journeying. Plants accompanied each stage. Initiates herbs: lavender, rose, mint for healing, soothing, heart-opening. Seers herbs: mugwort, poppy, hawthorn for vision, sleep, and inner sight. Dark moon herbs: yew, cypress, elder for working with shadow and grief. Sun herbs: St. John's wort, calendula, sunflower for joy, power, and protection. Ivy, Morgana, Nimue and the herbal archetypes. Avalon is home to mythical women of power and paradox. Morgana Le Fay, sorceress, healer, and shadow priestess. Associated with baneful herbs, trance plants, and the yew tree, she gathered belladonna and datura for moon rites and healing through pain. Nimue, Lady of the Lake, guardian of Excalibur, mistress of waters. She worked with willow, watercress, myrtle, and lotus, creating potions of truth, love, and forgetfulness. Igraine and Viviane, mother priestesses who brewed rose elixirs, sacred honeys, and crafted protective charms from ivy, rowan, and rosemary. V. Rites of the seasons, the herbal wheel. The Avalonian year followed the wheel of the year, each Sabbat holding specific herbal rites. Imbolc, snowdrop, angelica, cleansing and new light. Beltane, hawthorn, rose, mugwort, fertility and passion. Lugnasa barley, sunflower, meadowsweet, gratitude and harvest. Samhain, yew, wormwood, elder, ancestors and veils. They made incense, bath oils, smudge bundles, and sacred inks with moon water and crushed leaves. Viv, elixirs, ointments, and Avalon kitchen witchery. The priestesses made dream brews with poppy and lavender, heart balm oils with rose, lemon balm, and beeswax, healing teas of plantain, chamomile, and calendula, vision salves using mugwort and wild poppy infused in olive oil, ritual wines steeped with apple, cinnamon, and vervain. Offerings were poured at sacred springs, beneath hawthorn trees, or into the lake of memory. Sephen, spell from the Lady of the Lake, open quote. Willow weep and water speak, rowan shield the heart I keep. Mugwort open dreams to me, by apple's light, so mote it be, close quote.